Hello and good afternoon. I'm just going to hold off just a second just to wait for all the participants to join, and then we'll make a start. Okay, let's make a start. So hello and welcome to today's webinar. This is a webinar that's run by Chamber Customs for CDS Exports Explained, where we'll go through the CDS journey and the Chief Switch Off project as it comes to an end in the next 6 months. So welcome today. We'll move to the next slide and go through the agenda for today and who we are. So joining me today on the webinar is Emmanuel Gianquitto. He's the head of training and consultancy. I'm also joined with Marika Majesko, who is our operations assistant, and she'll be managing the Q&A today as well. My name is Mitch Perks. I'm the head of operations at Chamber Customs. If there's any questions that you would like to ask throughout the webinar, then please use the Q&A function. We'll either answer them as we go through the webinar, or we'll get to the end and hopefully be able to have time for a Q&A session. So the agenda for today. Oh, before we move on to the agenda, we'll just do a quick brief of Chamber Customs and who we are. So Chamber Customs, we offer customs clearance and transit in over 40 local chambers of commerce. Our knowledgeable teams can support your business with complex imports and exports, and we also help with special procedures and bespoke customs clearance. We've actually worked very closely with HMRC with the switch over to CDS. We pride ourselves on being a compliant service delivering for traders in the UK. We also deliver training, external training for import and export clearance, but also for bespoke services and the requirements of traders. And we also have consultancy packages that we deliver to our customers as well. And that's headed by Emmanuel from a training consultancy perspective. Now on to the agenda. So the agenda for today, we're going to just touch on the chief closure, give a bit of exposure to why we are having to move over to CDS. Then I will hand over to Emmanuel, who will go through the CDS export journey. We'll provide you with some good hints and tips and some explanation on what you require for exporting using CDS. And then we'll go through supporting your move, so the requirements that you need. And then as we go through, we'll answer Q&A, any questions that you may have, but have a Q&A at the end for any further questions. So just to give you a brief explanation of why Chief is closing. So for those of you that have used Chief previously, you will understand that the system is no longer the most efficient. It's quite a slow system. The reason why that is because 20 or 30 years ago, it could handle the volume. Over time, as we've grown with Brexit and naturally grown with the volume of importing and exporting in the UK, the system can no longer cope with that volume. And actually, it was a course of change in direction to create something that could cope with volume moving forward. The CDS project was first discussed, I believe, around 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. And from then on, there's been that project planning and that phased approach to move across to the CDS platform. Now, the initial date for exports to be switched off for Chief was the 30th of November 2023, so the end of this month. But this has actually been extended by HMRC until March the 31st next year. So we've been given kind of a 6-month extension. Imports can only be submitted on CDS. This phase, the first part of the phase, was actually completed at the back end of 2022. So there's no imports being submitted on Chief. It's all being put through CDS. And we're kind of moving in that approach now in phase 2 for export movements. So from our perspective, Chamber Customs, we aim to move all of our roll-on, roll-off movements over to CDS by the end of November. So we'd want to keep that in line with the original proposed date. And then we'll go into more detail as this webinar as we go through the webinar about what is available for exports and what is currently under testing or in progression. Okay, so CDS benefits. So just to kind of go through them, if we want to put them all up on the slide there. So CDS is more resilient, it's more reliable, and it's adaptable. And that's the main thing for us. It's adaptable to grow. It's fully compliant with the Union Customs Code legislation, and it operates both in the UK and the EU trade tariffs. A good point here is it does have the flexibility to grow in line with the government's ambitious trade plans to have the world's most efficient customs system by 2025. One of the most key points here, and we'll elaborate more as we go through, but CDS in terms of its responsiveness is a lot more advanced than what the chief system was. So CDS will provide you with almost an immediate response to your submissions when we put through a declaration, and will provide you with any of rejections that you may have within that declaration. Where chief worked more of a old kind of system way of going through the declaration by stages. Therefore, you might have had previously a rejection, you may have fixed the rejection, resubmitted, and then had a further rejection. So Chief kind of had that stop-start feel. CDS is more advanced in the fact that you can submit a declaration and hopefully get that through first or second time round. Now, CDS readiness, this is as of today. So as you can see, all of the imports is in green, which is fantastic. So all the movements are being completed on CDS for imports. And then in terms of exports, all roll-on, roll-off movements and GVMS ports is live. So we can submit declarations on CDS for them scenarios. Also, most recently, merchandise in baggage. This can be submitted on CDS, but the two kind of key areas that are either not available yet or under testing is inventory linked declarations and excise. So for inventory linked declarations, that's your entries that go via deep sea, via road, or via air, and that's currently under testing. We are currently waiting for an update from HMRC, where they should be providing us with more of a timeline to enable us to know when we can start at least attempting to put declarations through these routes. But at the minute, that's under testing. And with excise, that's not available yet, and we're not currently aware of any timeline for when that will be available. So planning your move to CDS. So in terms of what you will require, if you are doing your own customs declarations in-house, so you're a trader doing your own import and export customs declarations, you need to make sure that you have CDS ready software. So please check with your provider, if you use an external software provider, that they are CDS ready. It is different, and we will go into this in more detail as we move through, but the comparison between Chief and CDS, although the end result is the same, you get a customs declaration, there is a lot of differences between the two systems, and the software providers need to be prepared and aware of that. If you're delegating, therefore you want to use a customs agent, then please contact your customs agent and see if they're CDS ready. And if they are, great, you can start using CDS declarations for your RoRo and GVMS movements. In terms of instructions, again, this is something that Emmanuel will elaborate on as we move through, but you will need updated instructions. There is more information that CDS requires than what Chief System did. Therefore, if you are submitting instruction sheets to your customs agents, you will need to add additional information to enable them declarations to be submitted in a compliant way. In terms of considerations, obviously timing, give yourself time to move across. Remember that some of the functions may not work 100% at the minute, and this is why for us at Chamber Customs, we actually dual run with both Chief and CDS so that we have that backup there. If there are any problems with the CDS declaration, we can resort to Chief so that we're not delaying the declaration for the customer, but ultimately we can report back to HMRC any problems and any findings. And then in terms of things like communication, if you're a customs agent, then please ensure you communicate with your business and traders about switching over to CDS. And on the flip side, if you're the trader, then please communicate with your agent and discuss any additional requirements that you may need for CDS. Okay, so I'm now going to hand over to Emmanuel, who will discuss and go through the CDS export journey. And then towards the end, we'll get back together and discuss any questions that you may have. So thank you very much, and over to you, Emmanuel.
Thanks, Mitch. Hello, everybody. So yes, it's finally happening. We are moving the second part. We're moving export to CDS. And Mitch very nicely covered many of the reasons. Perhaps another reason to add to that is that the world is moving in terms of customs declaration from the SAT harmonization that was done in 1988 to a different type of harmonization, which has been led by the EU. And of course, the UK was still part of the EU when the CDS project started. And we've kept that approach to how we do customs declaration anyway, even now that we're not part of the common market. Now, that gives us a system which is very, very similar to what our colleagues in the EU are using, and it gives us a system that can cope with the complexities of Northern Ireland, and the fact that you have two tariffs technically in use. We have a tariff that covers movement in GB, and a specific tariff, which is the EU tariff, that covers things involving Northern Ireland. CDS can cope with that. So we are in a place where poor old Chief just couldn't do it anymore. Now, the nice thing, despite the various delays that Mitch was talking about before, the nice thing about CDS is that it's now out there and it's being used. Now, we've been using it for a long time. We have been trailblazers for HMRC. We've been testing declaration, as Mitch mentioned. We've been doing a few first. We did the first inventory linked. We did the first import, the first test on export. We tried to be at the forefront. But the nice thing is, like, out there in the market, it's being used every day. So you shouldn't be, if you're apprehensive about using CDS, and I think, Mitch, you pick up this a lot with customers, there is apprehension. We don't want things to go through CDS because they will go wrong. I mean, you must hear that a lot still.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the point I made previously, that for us, we dual run, so there doesn't need to be that fear. We still have time, and we've got both systems available.
But on the other hand, if we don't use CDS, we can't uncover the problems. And what HMRC tells us all the time is, please use the system. If there is a problem, let's put it through and get it sorted so that it can be fixed going forward. And that is a very important approach. Now, there are system issues, of course, but those can be fixed and resolved. But what we can do, and this is why we're here today, is as traders and agents, there is a lot that we can do to avoid errors, to avoid rejections. So the first thing that you will need to think about is actually how to get access to CDS. Now, I would assume that all of you here, if you're traders, you are already a trader with an IORI number. Now, HMRC made a huge song and dance about it because there was a proportion of traders in the UK who had only ever dealt with counterparts in the EU, and so they were not set up with all the necessary accesses. I think we are over that phase now. I think all the people here do have an IORI number. They have registered. If you're not registered, it's very straightforward. You can do it through one of the gov.uk pages, and of course we are here ready to help you if you need to. So once you are registered and you have an IORI and you have access to your government gateway, actually you can very simply register for CDS, and you do that by adding that to your profile. And immediately you have a financial dashboard which gives you some wonderful control over your deferment account, your postponed VAT, etc. Now, all of that is to do with imports, so we're not going to cover that on the webinar. But the most important thing for export that is relevant is that by being registered, you are able to pick up messages and routes and communications that Border Force and the other agencies may have about your movements. So it is very important that you are registered, because there is that immediate communication that Mitch was talking about that happens through the system, and you need to be able to pick that up. You don't need software for that. You just need to be able to access your government gateway. The second part, which is probably where some of the complexity comes in, is that CDS is a system that requires a little bit more information. So what happened from the SAD harmonization to date is that, well, the world has moved on, and we need a system internationally that is able to reflect the complexity of the supply chain. So one of the things that happens on a CDS declaration is that you are able to provide simply more data points, including more parties that are involved in the transaction. What for some of us has been a bit disorienting is that the information that is required has been reorganized. So some of us who've done declarations for a while, and there are people on this call who I'm sure have done declarations for longer than me, you will remember box numbers, and you know that was SAD 88. You know, it was box 1, box 44. You know, and each of these boxes for us now has got a meaning. Those boxes are gone. Okay, we don't have those anymore. Instead, we have data elements, and to make life easier, these data elements, which are the same across all the countries that subscribe to this type of data harmonization, you have groups. So you have 8 data groups, and these 8 data groups respond to the basic questions that you would expect when you're moving some goods, which are on your screen. So, you know, reasons why the goods are moving, authorizations and documents, parties involved, financial implications, routes, description of the goods, transport of the goods, and valuation. So these are the questions behind the 8 data groups. Is it important that you remember what's in each data group? I don't think personally is fundamental unless you're taking an exam, and we offer certification on for customs brokers and agents who want to certify their knowledge. The important thing though for everybody is that you are aware of this structure, because if you're looking for guidance, that's where you're going to find it. So if you're looking for guidance on, for example, how to declare transport modes, it is going to be in group 7. So it's useful to have this kind of information, which is of course available online, and we will be make a copy of the slides available with a recording for you anyway. But it's useful to have. So what we've done for you, and I think that this is the I like this. For me, this is the gold nugget. This is the important slide of the whole presentation. This gives you in one place the delta. It shows you what additional information or what changed information is required on a CDS export declaration. So what has become mandatory is that the method of payment for the transport charges, this now has to be declared. Previously, this used to be something optional to do, you know, and now it's mandatory, so you have to fill it in. So you can imagine that if you're an agent, you will have to ask that question. But if you're a client, if you're a trader, you will have to provide it. So it's important. There is more information about the carrier that is required on the declaration itself, the name of the carrier, the EORI of the carrier, or the registered headquarters. Route countries will now have to be declared. We have gross mass. Many of us have always asked gross mass because it was required for transit. So, you know, we kind of used to asking that question, but some didn't. That is now required. Something that changes is the references for the authorization held. So if you have special authorizations such as outward processing, for example, or temporary admission, or customs warehousing, or inward processing, you might have your old chief reference you should have received a letter from HMRC telling you the CDS authorization reference, which is going to be longer. If you don't have it, get in touch with them. You will need it, and your agent will need it to put a declaration through. Something that has been introduced with CDS is the nature of transaction. So on top of saying, for example, that you're doing a permanent export, you now have to say why you're doing this permanent export. Is it because we have a sale with a change of ownership? Is it a long-term hire? Or is it a return? Is it processing? They want to know in that, you have to declare it. Two more things which are quite rare and some quite fringe cases is guarantee details and additional fiscal references. Those are there. I doubt that they will be used much in the UK. But remember that CDS is not something that was written specifically for the UK. CDS isn't a system that exists in other countries with other names, but the bulk, the software existed. So HMRC imported that and then customized it for the UK. Some optional information which you may find that in your business are, is really interesting to declare, is the additional supply chain actors. So you might want to state who the freight forwarder is. You might want to state who the consolidator is. We have an additional field for traders reference, which is really nice to have that clearer audit trail. We use it a lot at ChamberCustoms. We have the ability to have two references, a local reference number, an LRN, and a trader's reference. That for our customer makes life easier because we can actually quote some specific references and customers can tally the declaration with their systems, and we can have our own references to know what we're doing for customers. And finally is the commercially agreed exchange rates. Now, this field was available before. However, what's happened now with CDS is that we can use a commercially agreed exchange rate instead of the HMRC given spot rate for the month. And this actually makes me remember to highlight something else. The guidance that drives how we do customs declaration, which is the tariff, has been completely updated. So there is a brand new volume 3 of the tariff, which is the mechanic's guide, as some old colleagues would describe it. There is a brand new version for CDS, and that explains to us how each of the data elements has to be filled in. Now, just to go through these elements, I think I've covered them. Will you know the method of payment for the transport charges? Well, our interpretation, and you are free to disagree with our interpretation, is that you can only declare this to the extent known. So if you're an agent, you can basically only find out if you have that information available. One reflection that we made when we considered this point is that depending on the Incoterms used on the transaction, we would assume that for the Incoterm, so you're delivered a place, for example, well, we would assume that the transport charges have been paid in the same way as the invoice was paid. So if that's a bank transfer, that would be probably, for the invoice, that would be the same for the transport charges. Now, for the E-Incoterm, so you're looking at the X works or the F Incoterm, so for example, free carrier, well, transport is not included in the invoice price, so we would suspect that the transport charges have not been prepaid. Now, of course, if you have more accurate information, that's brilliant. If not, this is a consideration that we made that we're sharing with you. This is not the guidance that you find, but it's our interpretation of how to read this data element. What we find interesting is that you have to state the information of the carrier, and we get this question all the time. I think Mitch gets it more than me because I don't look at this at operations very closely at this point, but people say, why do we have to provide information about the carrier? We don't know. It's the first available vessel. We don't know who's going to carry our goods. This is a little bit difficult because for safety and security, this information has to be declared. We, as you know, ChamberCustoms is owned by the British Chambers of Commerce, and as our colleagues at the BCC do a lot of lobbying, and they've been pushing to review the requirement on this data element, because we believe that especially for road movements, since we have to provide this information on the GMR, the goods movement reference record that accompanies the truck that carries the goods, we don't think that we need to say it twice. Whilst we're lobbying, we have to stick with the rules, and the rules currently say that this information is required. So, you know, be aware of that, and be aware that if you don't provide this information, then your declaration is missing something. And HMRC could actually disagree with what you've declared. Okay, now another point is the and we mentioned it on the initial slide. You have to provide the means of transport details. Now, for the carrier, so if I go back one slide, we're talking about the company, the entity that will be transporting the goods. That's one thing. But also, we have to provide the registration number of the truck that is transporting the goods, or the flight information, or the vessel name. This is not new. We've always had to do that. The difference here is that we have two fields. One covers the movement at departure, and one covers the movement at the border. Okay, so we could have the same one if it's the same truck that carries the goods across the border, great, but we could have different ones. The interesting thing, if you look closely at the guidance as we have done for both, it states where known, yeah, which means that at this point, if you don't know when you're doing the declaration, you can legally put unknown. So you might still have to know, for example, that the transport is British Airways. You may not know exactly the flight number of the day. You may know that one of the big carriers, one of the big road hauliers is moving your goods, but you may not know the registration number. In theory, this information should be updated before the declaration goes, and I go back to the fact that the information is also provided on the GMR. So far, I haven't heard of anybody being picked on this. This is a contentious area because it makes life very, very difficult for agents. Our take, because we like compliance, is to try and be as precise as possible. And then if you don't know, just put unknown on road movement. Going further down, we have to provide information on the route. Now, this is an interesting part. For transit, we're quite used to that. For a transit movement, you would have to always declare the whole route that the goods are taken. On export declaration, this was available on Chief, but it was never switched on. Now on CDS, it's mandatory. Now, you would start with the country of dispatch, which for the UK can only be we can only dispatch from GB. In Europe is different, but in the UK we can only do GB. The country of destination is known because, of course, that is the final country where the movement will end. And then the country of routing is whatever is in the middle. Now, the country of routing, you have to have you have a minimum that is required, and is the origin and destination point, which is great because we have that already. And the rest of it in the country or countries of routing is optional. So if you have a movement going from the UK to Romania, the minimum expected in countries of routing is UK and Romania, beginning and end. And if you don't want to put, you know, France, Switzerland, and the rest of the route, is absolutely fine. What we always say about optional fields is only fill the optional information in if you're sure that that information is correct. Not providing optional information is compliant. Providing wrong optional information is non-compliant. I hope that makes sense to everybody. Now, you will remember our good old friend box 44. Box 44 was the kind of box that would give any new custom agent nightmares, and it would make them like lose sleep at night. It was the box that contained all in extra and additional information to cover a variety of things. And the more the years went by, the more information got diverted into box 44. Now in CDS, what was done is that the information that goes into box 44 has been split. So we have all the AI codes. The AI codes are normally used to either document an authorization by declaration for a special procedure, or additional information for special procedures, or things that specific customs procedures require. All of those codes, which were known as the AI codes, have been moved to data element 2.2. All the information regarding the documents, so you're looking at valuation documents, licenses, and things like that, what in chief was DS codes, have been moved to data element 2/3. And finally, authorizations and approvals have got their own box, their own data element, which is 339. Now, this is interesting because Chief used to know that a certain EORI number was authorized for certain special procedures. So if you had IP, you wouldn't have to state it in a declaration on Chief. Whereas on CDS, you have to explain which of the parties that you declare is the holder of that procedure. And that's because, as we said before, in CDS, you can actually provide a wider chain, so you can provide more parties. Now, speaking about codes, the tariff has been updated. There's been a significant amount of work done by the teams on guidance in HMRC, and most of it is excellent. There are still some niggly bits that have to be fixed, but frankly, it's a never-ending task. What we have, which is really comforting at the moment, is a volume 2. So the tariff itself is up to date. So if you look up a commodity code, it will provide you the whole information about that commodity code and all the restrictions that apply to that commodity code. So if a specific commodity requires a certificate to be exported, or a license, for example, the tariff will tell you what license is required. There will be a link with more information, and very often links to the right body that you need to speak to obtain that license. And most important, for the purposes of doing a declaration, there will be a code that represents that license. Now, this is not new. We are used to that approach. The only problem was that for a number of years, the codes that we published on the European tariff that we were using were not compatible with Chief, because Chief stayed behind while CDS was being implemented. So we had a number of years where you would read a code on the tariff and you would have to go through some kind of black magic to understand what was the backward compatible code that we could use from Chief, and it was quite complicated. That's gone. Now you can trust that the codes that you find on the tariff will work on the system. That's the good part. The annoying part is that there are a lot of codes. There are many certificates, and each of the potential measures that you find against a commodity has to be answered, which means that if a commodity has 5 potential measures, for example, if you have coffee, you could have that the coffee might be organic, and you might be dealing with non-organic coffee. But because coffee has an organic measure that would potentially apply, you will always have to respond to it. So you either provide a code to say that you have a certificate, or there is a specific code that you have to provide to say that you don't need a certificate. That makes declarations a little bit more complex. Software providers are doing a marvelous job of making our life easier, and we've already seen a lot of changes in the software we use, and it's the same across the board. As we move on, the software is becoming more and more intelligent. AI is kicking in. And very often, as an agent, you're doing a declaration that says your product may need this license, and then it becomes easier for us to click through and let the software understand what codes to quote. However, if you don't have such a clever software, you will need to know where to find the information and what to quote, and that's going to be on the tariff. Now, as I said, there's like loads of fantastic guidance. It can be daunting when you approach the website. Mitch and Marika are nodding because half of the battle is to find, isn't it, Mitch, to find the right page.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's yeah, I think for the first couple of times that you see it, it can be, as Emmanuel says, daunting, but I think once you get used to it, it's a very, very useful tool.
And then, you know, ideally you bookmark your initial pages, and then you have this kind of, they call them collections now, where you have a kind of an initial splash page with all the links that you then use to navigate. These pages are indexed very well, and very often if you do a normal Google search, you will get to the right page. Just one word of caution: make sure that whatever page you land on is a CDS page, because of course some old chief guidance is still around, and we need to be careful that we use the right one. Now, how long will it take your company to get ready? It depends on the scale and complexity of your organization or the clients that you represent if you're an agent. We don't think it should take that long. I think we are fully migrated, aren't we, Mitch, on the import, and more than 90% of our exporters are migrated to CDS. Is that the right number?
Yeah, that's right.
And that's because we can. I mean, we just had to put in place updated instructions and discuss with the customers who had like specific requirements. But otherwise, as Mitch very nicely put it before, the end result is the same. You get a custom declaration, then your goods are exported. But it is true that a CDS export declaration looks different and requires different skills. If you're an agent, if you're actually doing the declaration, you need to make sure that you know what you're doing. The old chief knowledge that you have acquired over years of experience, unfortunately, not only is not relevant, but sometimes can misguide you. Some codes mean something different under CDS. I think the most important one, there was a mention of it before, is that the customs procedures have been changed. So we actually have new codes. Gone is 10.0.0.0.1, which most of us will remember as the old permanent export. We have new codes for that, which is 10.40.0.0.0. That's just an example to show you that some things would appear similar, but they are different. So have a look and decide if at this stage it is still good that you do it in-house or you use an agent, or vice versa. We put some links there for you to have a look at, and of course we'll share this with you. These for us are like the main links for you to have in your Google page. Okay, so before we move on to supporting your move, were there some questions, Mitch, that you wanted to tackle now? Okay, let's have a look. So if I start from the end, where can I obtain the list of CPC codes from? That's an excellent question, and you will find all of that in your Appendix 1, which says requested and previous procedure codes. And then actually there is another link, which is the 4-digit to 3 digits, basically is the correlation between old and new for where those things have changed. And then, so there is another question about the authorization references. So if you're doing a standard export, do you need to provide information on authorizations? The answer is no. You actually the authorization field, so data element 339, is only required if you are using authorizations on that declaration. Okay, and then just going further back, if you're not VAT registered, how do you add a CDS to your government gateway account? If you're not VAT registered, you can still register for your IORI, and you can still register for a government gateway ID, because when you do the registration using your UTR, your unique tax reference, you can get help directly from HMRC, or your accountant can give you a hand to register. We're also available to support, but that's how you do it. You do it via your government gateway. Okay, so how do we can support your move? The gov.uk webpage is a good page for support. And that should be your first port of call. Get up-to-date, latest information, and get that information for free. If you need help, then of course there are services out there that can provide you with support, but the initial information should always be from reliable sources. There is a lot of it, and you know that's where you should start. Now, some information that you might like to know, it's about this document and the waivers, and I smile at that because this is a never-ending discussion that exists between traders and HMRC. So on the one hand, HMRC wants traders to declare under their responsibility as much as possible. There are legal reasons for this. They don't like that things are just assumed, because from a legal standpoint, it's not good. They couldn't tell you off, they couldn't fine you, they couldn't take you to court on an assumption. So they want you to declare things explicitly. So back to the specific example of my organic coffee. In chief, I would only have to declare an organic certificate if the coffee was organic. If I didn't quote a certificate, it would be assumed that the coffee was not organic. In CDS, I have to declare that the coffee is not organic. Legally is a different approach. But this means that potentially you will have a lot of codes, and you will have to start saying things like, my coffee is not organic, is not a waste product, and it does not require a license, and not. And it can make your declaration tedious. So temporarily, they introduced a code, and it's a waiver that is a 999L, but it is temporary. And this sounds like an old code that we had in Chief, which was LIC 99. And I don't think it takes much to spot that it's very similar. You know, LIC 99, 999L is, you know, license waiver code. 999 LIC 99 on Chief was abused. It was used wrongly and way too much. And Mitch and I have met a lot of agents that were trained on the job, and they were told, whatever declaration you do, the first thing you put in box 44 is LIC 99. And that was a very dangerous approach, because basically you were declaring all the time that no license is applied, or no other license is applied. So LIC 99 does not exist on CDS, sorry. You have 999L, which sometimes is acceptable. So currently on the tariff, you will see that you can either say that you quote a specific Y code, for example, to say that the coffee is not organic, or you could quote the generic waiver 999L. And that's nice, because if you have 4 measures and all of them allow you to quote 999L, then you only quote 999L once, so it becomes quicker. Unfortunately, this is not going to stay. At least this is what we hear, this is what we are told. And we have an extension for another 6 months, so we can continue using it. But our approach is, review the requirements of your commodity and state explicitly what certificates you need and what certificates you don't need. Try not to learn to rely on 999L because it's going to go. And this is the official guidance. I also have to tell you that back in the day when LIC 99 was introduced, it was introduced as a temporary measure and it stayed for about 30 years. So you draw your own conclusions, but the official line is try not to rely on 999L. Our word on that is if you are the declarant, if you are the trader, you are responsible for what information goes on your declaration. So we believe that it would be in your interest as a trader to have clear instructions to your agent and say, I need this certificate and I don't need that. If you're an agent, our word of advice is don't make things up. Ask your client because it's their responsibility what they put on the declaration, not yours. So if it looks like they need a certificate or they need to declare that they don't need one, ask them, have that confirmation because it's really important for compliance. In terms of declaring buyers and sellers, it's not mandatory, but you might want to consider using it and it might help you. It might make your life easier in terms of having audit trails. And just if you need it, merchandising baggage is now available on CDS. We have some traders in our who work with us. We represent them and they deal with precious stones. And that's the kind of stuff that you want to take as merchandising bag. Very often you don't want to actually check that in. And we can do those type of declarations. They are available on CDS. Okay, so I think that is, we're heading towards the end. A summary in terms of what we can do as Chamber Customs. We are ready for CDS. We've been using it before it was available. We've been using it from day one. We've been testing it. We've been trying to break it. We have colleagues in our team who are very good at putting systems under pressure and trying to break them. We manage sometimes. And what Mitch said before is really important. There is dual running in place. We are using dual running. We are using both Chief and CDS for exports. Our default approach is CDS. And if something gets terribly stuck, we have the ability to revert back to Chief. But what we're doing, what Mitch is doing with his team every day is pushing as much as possible on CDS so that we have that confidence that when March comes, or when the new deadline comes, shall we say, we're ready. CDS is tried and tested. If you're self-representing, make sure that you're ready. Make sure that you don't leave it until the last minute. Start now. Things will be different, and consider training your staff. Now, it would be remiss of me not to say that we provide training as well. If you want, we can help you. But consider training. CDS has it's called a TDR environment, a trade dress rehearsal environment. It's a copy of the live system. It's basically a sandpit, if you like. You can actually ask your software provider to give you access to a TDR environment, and you can test declarations so you can be ready before the deadline comes. Mitch, back to you. How can we help traders if they don't want to do their own customs declaration? Because that's a possible approach.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chamber Customs, as I advised at the start, we actually offer customs clearance across our network in over 40 local chambers of commerce. And the way that we do that, we kind of offer two services, and there's also an additional service that's in progress at the moment. So we have fully assisted customs clearance. So that's basically where you provide us with the instruction, we act under direct representation, and we do the customs declaration for you. We take your instruction, you provide us with your commercial invoice and your packing list, and any other supporting documents, and we clear your declaration. The alternative to that is actually we can put the ball in your court. in terms of having fast track customs clearance, where we actually guide you through. So we'll help you with the clearance of your customs declarations and transit, but actually you get direct access to our system through a portal that we use called Exabler. So all you would need to do is use our simplified wizard. We have a new wizard mode currently under a progress and to be released very shortly, where you would upload a spreadsheet with your data, and actually the submission of that declaration is much faster. So there's two ways of working there. For traders that submit declarations with multiple lines, so many different commodity codes, then actually the fast track option is a good idea, because you can update that spreadsheet with all of your commodity codes and your item lines and the cost of each line, and actually it makes it really easy to complete a customs declaration in that way. So that's what we offer here at Chamber Customs in terms of customs clearance. So yeah, I was just going to say, do you want to add anything there, Emmanuel?
I just wanted to mention a little bit more about the wizard mode. I think that's a great addition, and is for those of our attendees who are declarants and they want to have control of their declarations. We believe that the control for declarations should be with the trader. Shouldn't be a dark art that agents kind of hide. The wizard mode would be very good because it would guide you through step by step, but you would still have, the backup of, our services within a local chamber of commerce to validate the information before it gets sent to HMRC. I think that's really important. What I wanted to do, I wanted to answer the last couple of questions. I think we have 5 minutes left. And then we can conclude, if that's okay.
Sure.
So the first question was, is what Chamber Customs does the same as TSS? It's no. So the TSS is the Trader Support Service. That is something that exists in Northern Ireland, and is a body that is financed by the central government, and it assists traders who deal with Northern Ireland, and that is a body that exists to help with like declarations and movements into Northern Ireland specifically, in order to guarantee the kind of frictionless border that the government committed to with the EU exit. Now, the services that the TSS offer are different. They relate specifically to Northern Ireland, and it's a service that you don't have to pay for. They do a type of declaration, and it only applies to Northern Ireland. We have customers that we represent across the board, and they choose to use our services for movement into Northern Ireland. Now, since you mentioned TSS, I just want to explain that when you move goods out of the UK for an export movement, we do an export movement, okay, and this is what we covered today. When you're moving goods between the mainland GB to Northern Ireland, you're not exporting from the UK. That's why I did not mention Northern Ireland here, but you have to comply with import regulations into Northern Ireland. So a movement from GB into Northern Ireland does not require an export declaration from the UK, because it's technically not left UK, but it will require something to enter Northern Ireland. And if you have specific Northern Ireland queries, I think we can discuss them separately. Contact us. I'll put some addresses up now, and there you go. You send us a message on Teams at ChamberCustoms.co.uk. We'll get in touch and we can see how we can assist you. The other question we have, Mitch, I think you can probably answer that one. It says a lot of the products that we supply are controlled under a license. I currently use a chamber to raise entries. That's great. That's very nice to hear. And I provide a chamber with a license and the reference. Would this change? Would there be different licenses just because we move into CDS?
No, the licenses don't actually change. So the licenses itself have not changed in any way. What will change is the way that we declare it. So it's not a matter of the license. So for example, a standard individual export license will have a reference similar to GB SIE / and then a number. That's the same. That's on the license, and that's provided by the provider of the license and Spire, whoever it is that you've contacted to get that license. But as Emmanuel advised previously, the DS codes, the AI codes that we input into CDS will change. And the way to find that is using the trade tariff. So as soon as you put the commodity code into the trade tariff, it will show you the license requirements, and actually you'll see the codes that you will need, either to provide the license, so you want to declare a license, or as Emmanuel quite rightly said, because it has a restriction on that tariff, if you don't want to declare a license because it's not relevant to that product, then there'll be a code there to input into CDS to not override it, but to tell CDS that you don't need to declare a license for that scenario. So yeah, references don't change. The way we declare it in CDS will have different methods.
Yes, and so the license don't change. The authorizations for special procedures, on the other hand, have a different format. They're not changed. You don't have to apply again. I just want to clarify. You don't have to apply again.
Nope.
It's just that the reference number is in a different format.
That's right.
So that's fine. And yeah, that's fine. I think I've answered a question. And it said, how do you declare no license required? I've put something in on an answer before. Great. So I think just to conclude, first of all, to say thank you, I just wanted to highlight that you can contact us either via our website, via the socials, you can call us, like good old telephone, send us an email. We can help you with customs clearance through the Chambers of Commerce. We can also help you with consultancy, and we offer specific support starting at £99 for one single question that you might have a declaration stuck or something like that. We can offer you 2 days to a large project of consultancy to support something specific. If you want to implement some special procedures, if you want us to come and audit your operations to check how compliant you are. We also offer a free health check for that you can find through our website. And as Mitch said before, we offer training. That's my area, so I'm very passionate about it. We offer some very in-depth training, which is the same training we provide our own staff on how to do declarations, and also we provide specific training. For example, if you run a customs warehouse and you want to know, if you can do it better, if you're not running a customs warehouse and you want to run one or any of the other special procedure. So do contact us if we can help you in any way, shape, or form. Now, we have, talking about customs warehouses, we have another webinar, which is on Wednesday, which we'll be leading. And if you're interested in customs warehouse, do come and have a look. It's an interesting, we'll cover what customs warehousing is, and what advantages it brings to a post-Brexit trader working in the UK. So come and have a look if you like. So I think that's all from me, Mitch. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, massive thank you from myself to everybody that's attended today. I hope you found it informative, and a huge thank you to Emmanuel and Marika for joining me today on the webinar. So
that's great. Thank you very much, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.